Hey guys, Nitro here. In today's video we are going to learn how to do a simple camera system, kind of like the one that is in Rainbow Six Siege, but a little bit more simple as I said. And before continuing to see how I did this, let me show you the final result. So here I'm going to have a character, and then I'm going to be able to activate these cameras. Okay, now I'm on a camera and I can move, I can rotate the actor, and this is going to be constrained, as you can see. Of course there's going to be a little bit of clipping in the wall because I haven't set this right. But of course, if you're going to manually tweak this, it's going to work perfectly. Okay, and then I'm going to be able to change between cameras, as you can see. And this one as well is going to be constrained. And the last one in the middle. And yeah, this is pretty much everything that this tutorial is going to contain. And now let's go and see how I did this. So first thing that we'll have to do is to go into our character. As you can see, and also here you might have seen that my skeletal mesh was misplaced, and that was made on purpose because I do not want this to block the camera, and I'm only using this as a reference to see where the character is. And now in event begin play, in event graph, we are going to get begin play, right? And in here we are also going to get player camera manager. And we're going to get this because we will need to access two important variables of our camera, and that is going to be view, page, and actually get view yaw maximum and minimum, and get your view yaw minimum. So basically this camera manager is going to store how much our character is going to be able to move on the z-axis, to rotate on the z-axis before it is going to be blocked. So think of this as clamping the rotation of our character. Okay, and now we will need to store these into variables, and I'm going to name them just like the variable from the camera manager. So view yaw max, plug this in here, and then we're going to promote this to a variable once as well, view yaw minimum. Alright, and now let me explain why we are going to use this. So my cameras are going to be characters, and players have this custom blueprint called player controller, and this is going to control how characters are going to move and how they are going to interact and stuff. And that means that this player controller, so the only player controller that our player is going to have, is going to be shared between both characters when possessed. So if you're going to change something in the camera, that is going to be changed in our character as well. So once we are going to repossess our character, we will want to change those back to default. Alright, and now let's create a custom event. So add custom event on possess. So when this is going to be repossessed, so that means that we are going to quit our camera system, we will need to get player camera manager, and we are going to set view yaw maximum and minimum. So once again, set view yaw minimum, and the values that we are going to set for these are the variables. So the maximum goes in the maximum and the minimum in the minimum. Make sure that you don't mess this up. So the Rainbow Six Siege camera is not something too special. Small character with a capsule component, arrow component, and then a mesh. And I don't have a custom mesh for this, but if you have, and maybe some animations as well, you could use that. And then instead of this mesh, I'm going to have a cylinder attached to it. And then I'm also going to have a camera attached to the cylinder. And I don't think I've changed anything in here. So everything is default. I only changed the capsule component, half height and radius. And then in event graph, what we'll have to do is to add a custom event. And as well, this is going to be called on possess. And this is going to do the exact same thing that it does in our character. So I'm going to get player camera manager, set view yaw minimum and maximum. Right. And now we'll have to promote this once again to variables. So view yaw minimum, and for the other one, view yaw maximum. Okay, and now what we'll have to do is to click on this sign here to make them public. So what this does is going to expose them in our editor, so we can edit these values on every instance of our camera. So if I'm going to drag two of these in here, and I'm going to go into details, I'm going to have here a default section. And in here you can see view your minimum and maximum. And I can set this to be 30, let's say, and the other one 160. If I'm going to go into the other one, you're going to see that the values reset. But they don't actually reset, but for this one, this camera, they were never changed. So they were changed only for this instance. Okay, and just as a reminder, you will have to manually set these values so they are going to fit wherever you set them to be. So let's say in this corner, or 180 here, or wherever you're going to put it. And the last thing that we have to do is to go here, and we are going to add controller your input, and we are also going to add controller role input. And here we are going to get axis turn up, and that is going to go for the role input, and for the yaw input we are going to get axis turn. So this come by default with the template that I had. If you don't know how to create this, we will need to go to edit, project settings, then let it load, go to input, and in here axis mapping, so make sure that you're on this one and not on action mappings. We want to go to we are going to have here turn and lookup, and for lookup I'm going to have mouse Y with a scale -1, and turn mouse X scale 1. Okay, now back into our blueprint. What we'll have to do is to plug these values in here, but now we'll have a problem with the add controller role input, and that is going to be that our values will be inverted. That means that when we're going to drag our mouse downwards, as you can see, so the movement that my mouse is right now, our camera is going to go upwards. And that means I will need to multiply this float. So float multiplied with a float, and we will need to invert these values, and we're going to invert them by using here a -1. Let's compile, and that's everything that we have to do for our Rainbow Six Siege camera. Now let's close down everything and go into our player controller. For me that is new blueprint. I haven't set a name yet, but I don't need one. So what we'll have to do in event graph is to get event begin play. So event begin play. And in here we'll need to do a cast to car. Car being my character. And the object is going to be get player character. So we are going to check if our character is equal to a car, right? So it has that class. And if that is true, this is not going to fail, it's going to succeed. And if that is going to happen, we're going to promote as car to a variable. And I'm going to call this character reference. And then what we'll have to do is to get all actors of class. Actually, let me explain why we promoted this to a variable. And that is because we will want to access this a little bit later without having to cast every time. So we only cast once, and that's it. And now here, get all the actors of class. Actor class should be Rainbow Six Siege camera, or however you named it. From out actors, we are going to do a for each loop. And what we'll have to do, before doing anything else, go to array element, promote this to a variable. I'm going to call this cameras. I'm going to delete this from here. I'm going to go back into my variables and set this to be an array, because we will have multiple, we are going to have multiple cameras, and I want to store all of them into one variable. So what we'll have to do is to get our array, and we're going to add. I think we could also use add unique, which is going to make sure that we don't have the same object in this array, so we don't have duplicates, but I don't think that will ever be the case anyway. Okay, let's compile, and this is everything we have to do for event begin play. Alright, now what we have to do, once again we need to go into edit, project settings, then let it load for a second, and let's go into input. In here we will need to create a new action mapping this time, and that is going to be use bound to my button. For me, you can set it however you want. So I'm going to get here use, and what we'll have to do is to get from pressed a flip-flop. A flip-flop is a node that is going to alternate between two pieces of script. So first time we are going to have A, and second time we are going to have B, and then it is going to reset itself, so we'll have A once again next time. And now by default we are not going to process a camera. That means that from A we will need to process it, and from B we will need to reprocess our character. So what we'll have to do is to get cameras, and from here we will need to get a copy of a camera. But how do we know what index we want to use? We could also use only the index 0 every time, but what if we want to be every time on the same camera, so we can just once be without it and see what's going outside, and then take a look to the camera and see what's going outside. So we have two ways of seeing that. And we don't want to scroll to every camera every time we are going to activate our camera system. We will need to create a new variable, and I'm going to call this camera index. And it's going to be placed instead of this integer. And by default it should be 0, and we are going to update this a little bit later. So what we'll do first is that we are going to check if this is valid, and I'm going to use the node with the question mark, because this is going to be a macro which is going to look like this. So it's going to be here is valid, and then a branch, and then just to output nodes. So from is valid we are going to get this. I'm going to add here a reroute node just for the look of our code, and I'm going to say here process. Right, that's going to be in pawn, and target is going to be self-reference, because the process node is going to ask for a controller. After that we are going to create a new variable called, let's see, is processing camera, and it is going to be a boolean. Let's compile, and by default it should be false, and now we are going to set this to be true. And also what we have to do from this camera, we are going to add a new reroute node, so it looks good, and then we are going to call on process, because as you saw we want to set the constraints of our camera. Okay, and now we have to do the second part. So from B what we'll have to do is to get our character reference, check if this is valid, once again the question mark node. If this is valid we are going to get once again the character, and we are going to process it. Okay, in target self, you could also just leave it empty, but I prefer to use the self. Okay, we are going to set is processing camera to be false, and then I'm also going to get it and call on process. Okay, so now let's check some cameras in our world. Okay, so I'm going to have two cameras, each looking in different directions. I'm going to press E, and as you can see one of our camera got activated. But currently we have two problems that we need to solve. We cannot move our camera. So the first one, why we cannot move to the left and to the right, is because we haven't set this variable. So I'm going to set here, let's say 150, and I'm going to play. And I'm going to first activate my camera, and as you can see my rotation is going to be clamped, so I cannot rotate more than this. But we also have a problem, we cannot look up and down, and that is because I accidentally got the wrong input axis. We have to get axis look up and not axis turn rate. Okay, and now let's see if this is working or not. So I pressed E, there's my character, up and down, and also you can clamp this if you want, and to the left and to the right as much as I wanted it to be. So everything is working just fine. And now back into our blueprint. What we have to do here is to set up a new input action. So for me that is going to be change camera bound to my 1 and 2 button. Of course you can bind this to whatever you want, maybe to the arrows, maybe you could bound this to the mouse buttons, or maybe any other button that you want. So what I have to do here is to get change camera, and here I'm going to have this key output. But before using that, first we'll have to get is processing camera, and we're going to check if this is true. So if we are processing camera, we are going to check if our key is equal to 2. Okay, so if it's equal to 2, we are going to do something, and if that is not equal to 2, which means that it is equal to 1, we are going to do something else. And the reason why we are doing it this way is because I want to be able to go to a previous camera and also to a next camera by using 2 different buttons. So from true, what we have to do is to get our camera index. Actually no, I think we just have to get the cameras once again and get a copy. We need to get a camera index, and we need to get here an integer plus integer. And the reason why we want to do this is because when we first process the first camera, this is going to be 0 by default. And because we are going to have 2 items in our array, that means that we are going to have 2 indexes, 0 and 1. And by adding 1 to 0, we are going to get the second index. If we would have, let's say, 5 cameras, we would have 5 indexes, 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so we could go every time from 0 plus 1, 1, 1 plus 1, 2, 2 plus 1, 3, and so on. Until the end when we won't be able to process that camera, and we are going to make sure that we can process that camera by using once again an isValid node. And if we can process it, what we'll have to do is to drag a new reroute node here, so this code looks clean. We are going to process, okay, again a self here, get self, and then I am also going to call onProcess just to make sure that this is going to work. And I'm also going to set my camera index to be +1. So camera index equal to camera index +1. And you could also use here increment, which is basically the same thing. It doesn't really matter. Okay, and now that we checked if the key that we pressed was 2, we have only 1 key left to check. But we don't have to check for that manually, so we don't have to get here another equal and check for 1, because there are only 2 keys, there are only 2 options for this to be pressed. That means that from false we are always going to get 1. So what we need to do is to copy this, copy the entire thing and paste it, and here we just need to subtract 1, and we could either have +1, subtract 1, so integer -1, or we could have integer plus -1. But I'm going to have here the usual subtraction, and now this should work just fine. I'm going to compile and I'm going to drag here a new camera, so I'm going to have a total of 3, all pointing in different directions. Make sure that you don't forget to set these variables. Okay, and now I'm going to play. So as you can see, now I'm in one of these cameras, and then if I'm going to press 2, I'm going to be on the one to the left of that one, and if I'm going to press 2 once again, I'm going to be in the last one, and as well all the constraints that we set. And now if I'm going to press 1, I'm going to be teleported to that one, as you can see. And if I'm going to press 1 once again, I'm going to be teleported to the first one, and I cannot press 1 once more. And then if, let's say, we would be on the camera to the left, so the second index, and if we are going to quit our camera system and we are going to enter it once again, the index is going to be saved. So as you can see, now I'm on the second camera once again. I can press 1 as well, and also 2. And this is pretty much everything for today's video. I hope that you enjoyed it, and if you did, don't forget to leave a thumbs up. And if you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date with new videos. Also, if you'd wish to study this mechanic in depth and maybe change it however you want, you can help me out over on Patreon for as little as $1, and you're going to get the project files for the entire mechanic. And so that being said, thanks for watching, and I'm going to catch you in the next one. Goodbye.